or we can just try to get some of the good things. And I think that'll be fun. Are we all set? Okay. Okay. Uh, Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai Elohim
Eloheinu melech
Maolam.
asher
asher kidshanu
kiddushanu b'mitzvotav
v'tzvotav
v'tzivanu
v'tzivanu la'asok
la'asok b'divrei
b'divrei
Torah.
Torah.
All right. I mean, you have to know this is me talking, and we've known each other for years and years and years. I am very, very disappointed. I've been waiting for a call from the Trump campaign to select me as vice president. That has not happened. And, it's painful. And then you know that these conventions all begin with blessings and invocations and stuff. And yeah, you're right. They didn't call me for that either. So I'm kind of down, but we'll deal with it. July 15th, the Republican National Convention begins day one, July 15th. And to be very clear and honest, and that's who I am, I will be watching much of the convention. I just will. I want to hear, I want to see, I want to feel what's going on there. And it's much better to do it with my own eyes and ears. Well, forget they don't work well, but to be there and not just read about it afterwards. July 23rd, July 23rd, there's going to be a really nice program at Wilshire. 2 p.m. and maybe I'll get corrected on this. July 23rd, 2 p.m. Stephen Windmuller, Dan Schnur, and one other will be providing a program and about the political situation. Stephen, besides being a precious and dear friend, is one of the top analysts of what's going on in the American Jewish community and as it relates to the general community. What he has to say always important. So
the calendar says 7 p.m.
7 p.m. that I mistyped it. I was worried about that. Okay, July 23rd, 7 p.m., Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I really recommend it. I mean, Stephen, you will find him to be devoid of histrionics. He just analyzes it as he sees it. And it's really, really good. So, hi, Brad. Hi, Tamara. Oh, everybody's coming in. And it's really, how could I guarantee it's going to be good? So that's July 23rd at 7 p.m. Steve Windmuller, so forth at Wilshire. And there's a huge event coming up on July 24th. On July 24th, we will have our next current events class. Second to that, Bibi will be addressing Congress on that day. So we're going to do some current events midday and then Bibi. And again, I fully intend, God willing, to watch it and to learn. Checking in. How are we all doing? Anything coming up that you would like to share with us? Kevin.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. I just want to say I'm going to Seattle today, and next Saturday I'm going to be in a triathlon. It's a mini triathlon, but I'm just excited to let you guys know that I will miss you guys and get some exercise.
Thank you, Kevin. I think I know the answer, but a triathlon includes what 3 activities?
It's going to be a half-mile swim, a 20-mile bike ride, and a 4-mile run. I'm going to do it with my son. He's going to try and win it. I'm just going to try and finish it and get a t-shirt for doing it.
That's cool.
Our thoughts and our love are with you. Drink water. Okay, right? Okay, that's fabulous. Okay, thank you, Kevin. And I see Diane. You're going to be in the triathlon?
Yes, I have been, but on a different subject. It's called the FAIR Plan, Homeowners Insurance. And I celebrated it last night. I finally successfully got the FAIR Plan. It's taken me a month and a half. And today my regular homeowners expire. So I got it one day before the expiration date. So those of you who are applying, do it early.
Okay, I'd like you to repeat that, please. You made it. You have a day left. You want to apply.
You know, the FAIR Plan is homeowners insurance for those of us that live in certain zip codes. We lost our homeowners insurance.
Oh,
And it's a big pain in the to reapply. There's thousands of people applying to one agency and they're trying to comply with everybody. And it's taking a long time to get acceptance. You have to take pictures, you have to send in documentation. And of course, it's much more money than your old homeowners insurance. Of course.
Diane, you understand that only gives you fire insurance. You still need
I applied for the DIC and I had State Farm, so State Farm will do the DIC.
Right.
I
okay.
did that, but I don't know how
Although
much that's cost.
only because you had them. State Farm is not writing for new
And
customers.
I have estimates for non-California agencies. It's a fortune.
Yep.
Okay.
It's gonna be
Diane,
a fortune.
Yeah, well,
really,
we've had to have FAIR Plan since the day we moved in our neighborhood. So we've
okay.
had it for 40 years.
Hold it. I mean, take that offline if you will. But Diane, your warning is a good one. Thank you. Risa. I can't hear you.
Have to say farewell and best of luck to Maya, who is leaving this week for Rwanda for her volunteer work. And then she's off to Germany for her first term of her senior year in college.
Aw,
Okay, so
be safe.
okay, that's really
Rwanda. Wow.
Rwanda.
Wow, be safe, have fun.
You know,
Doesn't sound like a fun place to me.
I keep repeating this. The big trip I made while I was finishing high school, we used to drive to Akron. That was pretty exciting. But Rwanda and Germany and Maya, we're sending you our love.
Wow.
And Mazel Tov. Wow. Send pictures. Send pictures. Okay, that's great. Anyone else? Anyone else with a personal thing to check in? That's fabulous. That is just fabulous. Okay, we're ready to move. This is a fascinating Sedra. I love the Sedra. I mean, Risa sometimes says to me after one of our classes, I really like it because you had 6 major ideas and it was bouncing around and that was fun. That's the Sedra. This Sedra has lots of stuff in very, very few chapters. So, and I'm going to need your help in trying to understand what we're doing here. First of all, it speaks about the red heifer. The red heifer.
Can you tell us where you are? Can you give us chapter and verse so we know where to keep?
Yeah, but I'm only right there at the beginning. Numbers chapter 19, verse 1. Follow it.
Numbers 19.
What I want is, who can tell me something about the red heifer? We've been here. Who can tell me something about a red heifer? I think there would. Okay, Steve.
Among other things, it can't have any speck of any other color until after it's a year old. And then you have to use its blood to, that's what's used to sanctify the temple.
So the red heifer has to be a red heifer. It has to be a red heifer down to its very hair, skin, everything about it, relatively rare. Yes, you have to use a true red heifer. Mara.
I think it's important to note that the heifer is a female.
My bad in not doing the zoology required to be. I think you accused me last night of never wanting to support for a female candidate for president. I remember you said that to me.
Well, I think it's significant that a female of the species is chosen, has to be pure, is sent out, and I don't think it's something we ever discuss.
Okay, there it is. Okay, a red heifer is definitely a heifer. Okay, and I would say to that, no bull. And that's great. It's true. More. What else can you tell me about the red heifer? So interesting. Herman. You're muted. You're muted there.
Rabbi, first of all, I didn't mean to answer your question. My book is different. My book doesn't say it's a heifer. My book says it's a red cow.
We're going to go with heifer. Okay, yeah. I mean, there are different.
Either way, even as a cow, it's definitely a female. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Somehow
But then
I have a feeling that a cow.
Also, my book says there's no such thing as red. They probably meant brown.
The problem, cow in my mind gives a picture of a very large, complete, full adult animal, and heifer is a somewhat younger beast. At least that's my non-scientific approach, but that's fine. Now, the question of color is extremely important. The Hebrew is not questionable. Para aduma, aduma, adom, edom, red. Para, heifer, red, heifer. I mean, that they say that it's meant to be brown. If God wanted the Torah to say brown, God would have said brown. But I don't know. There are a lot of questions here, but I don't know any question about whether red is red. No, right? It's red. Okay, we're going to stick with red heifer, and of course, animals change their color. They get older, whatever. Steve,
I was going to say, I think someone thought it might be brown because red doesn't exist. They've actually had some red heifers in Texas. They just didn't quite last a year without getting some white hair.
Yeah. I felt that way when I got some white hair. But yes, okay. But there you are. I mean, we're setting up the parameters, and we're going to talk about how those parameters exist. Howard.
I think heifer, the word heifer in English means a female cow or female bovine. But I think the one commentary says that it's to call it a heifer is not warranted by the Hebrew, which in no way suggests the beast is not mature.
That's given a correct yes from Tamara. So it could be called cow and not heifer, and we would have missed a lovely conversation. Okay, got it. All right, Risa. Can't hear you.
Sorry, that was from before.
Oh, okay. Now, so we have the red heifer. So that's fun. So you get a red heifer. And what's the point of the red heifer? What, in other words, what does manipulating the red heifer end up doing for the Jewish people? What does it do? What's the point of sacrificing, burning, getting the ashes of a red cow, heifer, beast, whatever? What's the point? What are we doing here? Sukasa.
I have no idea, but I'm wondering if the color red has something to do with blood. And that's why specifically they talk about the blood. And just as an aside, we were recently on a bike trip and they talked about blue cows. Well,
what?
They talked about blue cows, that these were the Belgian blue cows. They weren't really blue, but if you really thought about it, they had a bluish cast. So I think that this could be the same with the cow, but I'm wondering if there's some relationship between blood and the cow.
Okay, and I'm going to say that from tomorrow's affirmative head shake, yes, tomorrow, I'm going to say yes, it does. Is there more?
Yeah, because it's done, the whole ritual creates special water, and the water is called water of Nida. Nida is a term for menstruation. And so the femaleness and the blood, of course, Adom and Adama and Dam are linguistically, that is land, red, and blood are linguistically connected, but also the product of the red cow is me nida, water of nida. And nida everywhere else means always menstruation.
So there you have it. You know, it's not just a color. It could have been blue. It is something that connects deeper. Right? Tomorrow.
Can I say one more thing? But you probably are going to go there. So I hope I don't steal it.
Go ahead.
Interesting is that in translation, you lose that connection with nida, with menstruation, because it's called water of lustration or whatever. But what's unique about water is there is menstruation else makes a person impure. The water of nida, the water that comes from this ritual, is what you use to make someone pure.
Yeah, I mean, the core debate and the fun that the rabbis have is you take the blue cow, you burn it, you take the ashes, and you do what you're doing with it. In the meanwhile, it is mitaher tameim. It is purifying the impure. The impurity in this case is proximity to a corpse. You are made impure by being near a corpse. And the way to get cleansed is through this process with the ashes of the red heifer. But the people who prepare, are you catching this? The people who prepare the ashes are rendered impure. So the same ashes are mitaher tameim, mitaher and mitameh. I'm going backwards, my head is shut. It renders impure the pure and renders pure the impure. The same ashes of the calf do both things. And the rabbis discuss this ad nauseum. And there is, you can give all kinds of midrashim, but this is a very powerful thing. Can I say mitameh to horim, mitaher to meim? Yes, I said it. So the same ashes that are used to purify a person who has been proximate to a corpse Also, the people who prepare the ashes are themselves rendered impure and have to go through a waiting process. So the ashes are really powerful. And the good answer is when the rabbis say, how can the same thing be purifying and impurifying? They sit back, stroke their long, luxurious beards, and say, it's God's will. Okay, Tamara.
But this is such an important text, but it really illuminates the whole notion of purity and impurity, because it points out that purity and impurity are issues about the nexus of life and death. And so menstruation is also about life and death, because it marks a cycle that didn't end in life. And so rather than we have this notion that we think of impurities, it's not a good thing, they're not saying that. They're just recognizing that purity and impurity have to do with this movement between life and death, which is powerful and has to be respected and acknowledged through ritual.
Right, and for example, the mikvah is one of those places in which that will occur. We'll get back to that. That's really important. We're dealing with there's some word, is it juju, the magic? There's some sort of magic. There is deep magic in the story of the red heifer, the ashes, purity, impurity. Kevin, Brad.
Oh, hi. So when I look at the internet for heifer, I see it's female cattle who hasn't given birth yet, as opposed to my text says cow. So is there a reason why we're saying heifer? Is it like a virgin cow that we're talking about?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I just would hate to be on the committee that has to go through determining whether or not the heifer is a virgin. You know, but you know, I'm not going to go. Several thoughts crossed my mind. They were all bad. But yes, yes, yes. Brad.
Well, Rabbi, I was just curious if you were familiar with the Greek concept of the pharmakon. A pharmakon is a word that indicates it's both a remedy and a poison. A remedy and a poison. So that's what made me think, you made me think of that when you talked about this concoction from the red heifer, which both pures and impures.
Can you please spell the word for me?
Pharmakon. And it was popularized by Jacques Derrida a number of years ago, who wrote about the pharmakon in literature.
Okay. Stanley Davids, welcome to a world you knew nothing about. So that's a direct connection. In other words, the ashes in their way and the pharmakon in its way. Thank you. Rebecca.
I want to continue with Tamar's concept about life and death, because the rest of the Parsha talks about life and death, with the life of the water and then the life of water not being around, and then Miriam dies and then Aaron dies. So is there a connection there?
There's a total connection, but that's why this set is so rich. I want to talk about that, but now we suddenly are. Yes, but we're going to get to water, and you're totally correct. Maran Harv?
Well, I was going to say something similar, except I was going to point to the fact that I believe this Sedra also contains Moses striking the rock. And so again, there's a question of intent, and how one action can contain both good and bad, sanctified and unsanctified?
When I think about the statement, I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse, you know, it sets it up as if they were antinomies, as you know, they were like exact opposites. They're not really. They're not really. There's just a lot here. I want to go ahead with some new stuff on the ashes and the heifer and other stuff. I'm going to read this because it's, to me, interesting. The Mishnah teaches that up until the destruction of the second temple, ashes for this kind of purification had been prepared from a total of only 9 red heifers. Okay, that means that a heifer is a pretty big beast. It was prepared, it was stored in the temple, the ashes were stored, and over the years, through 70 CE, ashes had been kept in the temple, and in that whole process, you only needed 9 heifers down through the ages. The very first red heifer, Moses did. Have them bring you a red heifer. Fine. Now, tomorrow, this is directly for you. The second red heifer was done by Ezra, according to the rabbis. Ezra was a red heifer preparer. I didn't know that. And during the entire era of the Second Temple, only 7 more heifers were done. That was enough. But catch this. The world awaits the preparation of the 10th red heifer. Boy, if you're going to write a novel, you got a real thing here. The 10th red heifer. Because according to rabbinic tradition, the chef in the preparation of that heifer is the Messiah. So the Messiah will come, and one of the things that the Messiah will do is to prepare a red heifer to bring about purification and readiness for whatever the Messianic age means. Maimonides says, and I'm quoting, and the 10th red heifer will be accomplished by the King, the Messiah. May he be revealed speedily. Amen. May it be God's will. So one of the signs of the Messianic era is the Messiah preparing ashes from the red heifer, which backs up the story of, and Steve alluded to it, there have been efforts and efforts and efforts to raise a red heifer. But it wasn't only out of, curiosity. If this red heifer will appear, that is a sure sign that the Messiah is coming. So be wary of the red heifer. Now, that's it that I have in something really interesting. You know that there is a little bit of a question nowadays about having a leader of the people who is old. Now, I do not say anything with regard to the contents, but the implication is older is better. And by the way, I like that. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. And the rabbinic literature is replete with the admonition that the older a law or a tradition is, the more valid it is. Why? The older it is, the closer it gets to Sinai. Okay? So old, connecting to the ancient past, is always more powerful. No, I'm totally in agreement with this. But the question is, you're sitting in the temple and someone says, hey, go check on the ashes of the red heifer. How are we doing? Do we have enough? And the Kohen looks, checks out the ashes. They're running short. It's time to prepare another red heifer. What does one do to validate the strength of the new ashes? You mix them with the old ashes. When you put some of the old ashes and all together with the new ashes, that makes the new ashes as efficacious as the old ashes. Fascinating. It really, really is. I'm not going to go into this, but there's a whole nother field in kashrut. How much impurity can something sustain and still be kosher? And there are questions about it. And it's actually a very small amount, like 1 out of 60 or something like that, that retains the impurity, makes it impure. So, folks, if you're preparing the ashes with the Messiah, you're going to have to be very wary of the mixture. Any question, and we're going to move on. The Sukasa mentions precedent. Nowadays in the Supreme Court, precedent means nothing, with no, nothing personal. So, but older is better. And when the rabbis want to say, Sukasa, that something is authentically ancient, it's midoraita. It's something which comes from the Torah. If you can link something back into the Torah, you have the most possible authentic stuff. I'm enjoying this too much, and there's a lot to cover. Anyone else want to say something? Pop in. Okay. Red heifer. Okay. Now, closer to Sinai is always better. Now, the next thing, water. Do you ever notice what happens in chapter 20, verse 1 of this Sedra? Chapter 20? Something weird. They have just finished chapter 19, making waters of lustration, whatever it is. The water. Tamara, I'm sorry. I didn't follow you all the way and realized that May Nida is translated water of lustration. They cut out the menstruation in the preparation of that heifer. I'm just looking at it, and there it is. Okay, my bad. where are we in the end of chapter 19? Chapter 19 of the book of Numbers. Where are we? We are in the first year of the wilderness wandering. The rabbis spend a lot of time trying to establish a chronology. Then look at verse 1 of chapter 20. Where are we in chapter 20, verse 1?
The wilderness of Zin.
I'm sorry?
Later.
The wilderness of Zin.
Is that year 39?
Pardon?
Is that year 39 all of a sudden?
Yeah.
No.
This is the 40th year in the desert. Between the end of chapter 19 and the beginning of chapter 20, 19 is giving rules that were handed out at the beginning of the wilderness wandering. Chapter 20 heralds the last year of Moses' life. Okay, there's certain things that I enjoy. I loved finding that out because I would be reading it as if it were, one after the other. No. As Steve points out, they came to the wilderness of Zin and stayed at Kaddish. Miriam died there. Boom! Fascinating. Our understanding of trying to create a chronology is not related to the Torah author's sense of chronology. Kaddish may not be a city you know. Have you ever heard of Eilat?
Of course.
That's Eilat. Kaddish is Eilat. Okay? Different names. So the children of Israel came out to this date and they were there at Eilat. I presume they were swimming with the porpoises. I don't know. But they were there in Eilat, in Kaddish, and all these things began to happen. Would you please look at what happens in verse 1? Do you see that? What happens? This is really important. This chapter is all important.
Miriam dies.
Period. She dies. Period. Now, we understand that Miriam had a pretty significant role in the life of the Israelites from the time that Moses was born. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole book, the Torah, chapter 20 of the book of Numbers, she dies. It's been a long involvement with Miriam. And what does she get in the text?
No mourning.
Vayeshev ha'am b'kadesh, and the people dwelt in Eilat, wherever. Vatamat sham Miriam. Miriam died, they buried her. Next. That's a bit unsettling, especially look at chapter 20, verse 24. Look at verse 24. Let Aaron be gathered to his kin. He is not to enter the land that I have assigned to the Israelite people because you have disobeyed my command. Take Aaron and his son, bring them up to Mount Hor, strip Aaron of his vestments, put them on his son. There Aaron shall be gathered to the dead. Moses did as God commanded, stripped Aaron of his special clothing, and then they came down. And verse 29, what does verse 29 say, Mara? I want this to be bitter on your lips.
And when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, they wept for Aaron 30 days, even all the house of Israel.
Yeah, that's different than when Miriam died. Miriam died, no reason given, no mourning, no sense of loss. Next.
But we're also, when she dies, her failings are not recited.
Her failings are not recited, and we also mention right after that, Miriam died, and the people complained, of course, we don't have water. And do you remember the understanding that the rabbis had? Miriam, the mother, the life giver of Moses, not mother of Moses physically, but raised him. Miriam was associated with Mayim Chayim, the water of life.
Yeah, water wells follow
And
her everywhere.
hold it. And
Okay.
when Miriam died, the water, the well, dried up. There was a well, according to rabbinic tradition, that traveled with the Israelites through the desert by virtue of the zechut, the merit of Miriam. And when Miriam died, that well dried up. So there was something that happened. But the contrast between the death of Miriam and the death of Aaron is stark. Donna.
I was just saying, right? The water wells followed Miriam when they crossed the sea and they were singing everywhere she went. That's what I was going to agree with you about.
Water and the Red Sea, the crossing of the Red Sea. Water is critically important, right? Critically important. I remember the only thing that threatened me about wandering through the desert of Sinai.
Having water.
No, it was Diet Coke, but it could have been water. It could have been water. That was very unsettling. And so, what did we do, Risa? We brought Diet Coke with us so that we could survive the desert. Life is tough in the desert, but there's no way we can walk around the contrast between the death of Aaron and the death of Miriam. The Torah, I think, expects us to be grateful that it even mentioned that she died. And that's it. So much for Miriam. So,
Rabbi, I think that's terrible that they didn't mention her and that she wasn't recognized. I don't like that. Okay.
well, I think there are a whole bunch of people who don't like that. Yeah. And Aaron is connected with Moses and the rock. Moses and the rock. Please look at Exodus chapter 17, verse 1. I know that's a big turn back. Exodus 17, verse 1. And I'm going to get to this quickly. I'm in 12. I'm in 19. I passed it. Okay, right before the 10 Commandments are given, verse chapter 19, 17, verse 1.
Page 446.
I'm sorry?
Page 446.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm at 452. 446. Okay, so the Moses in Exodus is trapped in the problem of, do you speak to the rock or do you hit the rock, right? And in Exodus, Moses is told to speak to the rock. In Numbers, Moses is told to hit the rock. This may seem massively petty. On page 1027, 1026, you and your brother Aaron take the rod, assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. Then you'll give them water and they'll drink. Moses took the rod. Moses and Aaron assembled the people. And Moses said one of the most famous lines in the Torah. One of the most famous lines. Listen, you rebels. Shall we get water for you out of this rock? And Moses raised his hand, struck the rock twice. Out came abundant water, and the community drank. It was on this basis that God will say to Moses, you're not going into the promised land. You failed as a leader, and I have to ask you, what is going on here? Brad.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that, Rabbi, but what occurs to me is that in terms of speaking to the rock, we're talking about the performative nature of speech. And where does that bring us? It brings us back to Breshit, for example, where God spoke and the world was created. In the beginning was the Word. So God, in a sense, is giving a divine type of power to Moses when he tells him to speak to the rock, because that's performative in the same way that it was for God. And then what does Moses do with that divine power? He doesn't use it. Instead, he hits the rock. So I don't know what to make of that.
I have to share with you a moment of personal, unease. And that is, you used the expression, in the beginning was the Word.
Yeah, I know that's a Christian concept, but I mean, God does speak and the world is created.
Yeah. God speaks and the world is created.
So it's the performative nature of language.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for performative, by the way, is one of those words that keeps coming up in my reading now. I don't know, performative is just one of those things that's there. The power of language, speech is a creative source. obedience to God as the sine qua non. So Moses did a major flub, but
Why?
what you're suggesting, Brad, is that the very notion that God says, speak to the rock, is not to be ignored.
Where does he say that, Rabbi?
Well, it says, your brother take the rod and order the rock. I assume that's speech. Order the rock to yield its water.
If I go back to Exodus, as you pointed out earlier, Exodus 17,
Yeah.
God doesn't tell Moses to speak to the rock. He says, hit the rock.
Hit the rock.
He says, take the rod which you used to part the sea and hit the rock.
And that rod was kept next to the ark and so forth. Yes, Herman, correct. Tomorrow.
Right, that's the contrast between Exodus, because here it says very specifically, speak to the rock in Hebrew. V'dibartem, that means speak.
Tomorrow,
So,
no, exactly what are you quoting from?
I'm quoting from the Hebrew.
No, excuse me. From where in the book?
It is Numbers 20,
You're back into Numbers.
verse 8.
Okay, you're back into Numbers. Thank you.
Right, so there's a contrast. Exodus, yes, strikes the rock, but in Number it says almost the same thing, gather, etc. But it says v'dibartem, you will speak to the rock. The word is not vague ordered, but it's really specifically language.
I love still the term performative that Brad brings us to. Speech, when, even doing the priestly benediction, there are certain things where speech takes priority. And Brad, help me say it again. Speech, explain performative.
Well, a speech and action become one.
Okay.
Speaking it makes it happen.
And that's an element in magic too, is it not?
Yeah,
Magic requires
interesting. Yes.
very often abracadabra, whatever. Speech is part of performative. I have to get to something big, but Ray, go ahead.
Thank you. Now, two observations struck me. I'll do one and see if I've tried your patience before doing the other, which is a paradox. The first, I'm looking back at Exodus now, and I'm noticing a phrase that I think I've never really been conscious of before. This is around 17, beginning verse 5, where Moses is talking to God, and Adonai responds and says, verse 6, I will be standing there before you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock and water will issue from it and the people will drink. But this seemingly transitional phrase, at least when I've encountered it before, because I never noticed it, I will be standing there before you. That seems significant. That seems a qualifying framing of what's going to happen. God is saying in advance, God is going to be there. And when is God not with Moses? But God's saying it flat out in a way that almost for me recalls if you're on the board of trustees or in your meeting at work and you're planning a meeting where more people will be present. It's like, okay, here's going to be our agenda. Who's going to say this part? Who's going to say that part? And you're honoring the order of speech and place in the totem pole. And if you are courteous with each other and respectful of a place, you make precautions. Okay, well, you go over this point, I'll go over this point. And I think that's what God is kind of doing here by saying, I will be standing there. That is a really particular point to make. I will indulge in my second point, which is a paradox, that in the difference between these two places in the text, one God says, strike the rock, the other God says, order the rock. The irony is that Moses gets judged and punished badly for speaking, when in one episode it's rendered as speak to the rock, but saying nothing about striking, and in the other one it's saying strike the rock, but saying nothing about speaking. So it's ironic that Moses broke one of the two rules in the texts, but the rules literally contradict each other because he followed it correctly in a different place in the text.
Thank you. I'm going to have to run because I am dying to share these two things, and they're going to have to done briefly, and we'll talk about it next year. Do you know, if you look at 21:6, 21:6, you will find that the people speak against God, and God sends fiery serpents, nachash. And then to make them heal, God told Moses to put a snake on top of a staff, a copper serpent, and anyone who looked at it will be healed. Where does this remind you? What does it take you to?
Garden of Eden?
No, the image of healing is a staff with a serpent on it.
Yeah.
Comes from
Kaddish.
this. But,
Hi.
ladies and gentlemen, what happened to the copper serpent that was made in the desert? Where did it go? And I am happy to share with you that it wasn't until the time of King Hezekiah, around in the 600s BCE, doesn't matter, that Hezekiah broke the serpent that Moses had made. What am I saying? That the serpent on a stick was part of the worship appurtenances of the Israelites up until 600 BCE. And there is interesting conversation whether there was a cult of snake worship within ancient Israelite tradition.
Oh, wow.
Now, to close this, the fiery serpent is referred to as a seraph, seraphim, one of the kinds of angels, which means that the Israelites embedded the serpent into cosmology. And I want you to worry about that. We'll talk about it next year. And I said to you,
Just a second, I'm getting my shoes so I can go outside with. I got the key.
please, Shimuna
Okay.
Hamorim.
Wait a minute.
Shimuna Hamorim. Listen, you rebels. And the rabbis say it wasn't what Moses did that disqualified him as a leader, but it's what he exhibited. He called his people rebels, he disparaged them, and the rabbis would have used modern language. No leader can be a leader who has no empathy for their people. And Moses demonstrated a lack
How
of.
much moaning and groaning was he supposed to take for 40 years? He had to lose his temper, Rabbi.
You're forgiving. Okay, but this idea of Shimuna Hamorim, the loss of empathy, what ultimately disqualified Moses was that he stopped caring for the people.
And how can he elect Trump?
I don't do things like that. I am just pointing out what Torah says. We go now. I love this. I told you this was a rich chapter. It's unbelievable what's in here. But we go now to mention those who have passed away during the previous month. Richard Dunner, Scott Epstein, Minerva Cravoy, Andy Natker, Arnie Nelson, Zachary Seff, Marvin Steinberg, Alice Vogel. And the following, the anniversaries of whose deaths have occurred during the past week. Maurice Abermeyer, Sophia Allenberg, Norman Beck, Elihu Ben-Gera, Lee Bennett, Patan, Ashley Botnick, Ray Batashansky, Glieka Brenner, Beatrice Fabric Broder, Michael Cameras, Eleanor Castleman, Bernard Cezanne, Ed Chains, Joyce Mullery Clark, Beatrice Court, Charlotte DeRoven, Murray Dickman, Sheldon Dorff, Harold Eisen, Gene Feinstein, Samuel Ferks, Myron Force, Melba Rosalind Franklin, Marcia Gardner, Judy Gelfand, Karen Garrod, Michael Gittleson, Ida Goldberg, Leonard Goldman, Lillian Grossberg, Max Grossflin, Millicent Hamer, Hannah Wright Heyman. Merle Hilliard, Dora Hoffman, Irene Howard, Elizabeth Jacobs, Perry Jacobs, Michael Jaffe, Sianja Behari, Dearla Carrots, Sheila Josephberg Kasten, Max Kessler, Lee Elizabeth Lauter, Suzanne Lax, Donna Marlo Levitis, Erwin Liebman, Eileen Lindenbaum, Eileen Littman, Helene Gettelson Lopez, Anna Smithline Magnan, Donald Isaac Magnan, Beverly Mandel, Jeanette Jerry Markman, Batashia A. Malamed, Helena Migdal, David Mindlin, Jenny Midland, Sidney Joseph Moskowitz, Lisa B. Nesbitt, Paul Orloff, Yitzhak Ovadia, Lillian Palanker, Phyllis Prescott, Bess B. Ratner, Sidney Rawson, Cynthia Round, Minnie Rubin, Miriam Sanders, Herbert Schirmer, Shirley Glassberg Schwartz, Frieda Shapira, Aaron Joshua Simmons, Samuel Simon, Myers Slifkin, Max Sobel, Samuel Spalter, Pauline Stark, Griselle Stern, Pauline Taylor, Jerry Traeger, Marianne Trebach, Allison Kellner Villamater, Louis Wallach, Paul Weingarten, Joe Wolf, Issy Wolf. If there are other names to be remembered, please speak them aloud now or hold them in your hearts.
Rebecca Gordon.
We bear in mind as well the names of all of those who died in defense of the United States, those who died in defense of the state of Israel, those who died through senseless acts of terror and horror, those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. We hold them all. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Bialma, Biamli, Malchutei, L'chayechon, Yomecho, L'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Koviv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Rabba B'varach, L'olam Le'omei Hamaya. Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitaleh, Shmei Kudisha, Le'ela Mincha, Birata, Tush B'chata, Tamiran B'alma, B'imru,
Amen.
Beru, Amen.
Rama Rabba Min Shemaya, Chayim Aleinu, B'al Kol Yisrael, B'imru, Amen.
Beru, Amen.
Oseh Shalom, B'Romav, Shalom.
Beru, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a beautiful week. Thank you for making this so important. Love you. Be well. Shabbat.
Love you too.
Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Hey, is
everybody.
that a new beard? Is that a new
Bye.
beard?
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Myra.
Thank you.